All right. Welcome to the 17th Nantucket Film Festival. This is this the first morning coffee with of the festival? Second. Okay, it's the second morning coffee with the festival. Thank you all for coming so early in the morning, especially the ladies with the tiaras. That's a very celebratory touch. I'm Leah Rosen. I am a former film critic for People magazine. I am moderating this event. I think the idea here is just to introduce you to a half dozen of the filmmakers involved in the festival. We'll let each of them talk about their film, and then at some point we'll open it up to questions. Sound fair to everyone? So that's the plan of attack. The lineup here, the impressive lineup, going from my right, would be, this is Mike Birbiglia, who has a film called Sleepwalk With Me. Many of you may know Mike from his stand-up comedy, his appearances with The Moth on
This American Life,
This
maybe?
American Life especially, his best-selling book, and he can tell you more. When it's his, let's go through who's on the list, and then we'll let Mike talk. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Next on my list is Todd.
Is this person videoing this with the iPad, or is that just, are you using the mirror function? You're just videoing it? For what? Like, what are you gonna put it on? Oh, all right. Well, you know, we have these professional cameras set up right here, and if you get in touch with those people, I'm sure they'll email it to you. They have much better cameras.
You're stepping on someone's creative impulses.
If that's a creative impulse, I'm gonna kill myself.
All right, next in line.
Awkward.
Next in line, Todd Louisa, who is the director of Hello, I Must Be Going, and his screenwriter next to him, Sarah Kossoff. This is a lovely film opening in August?
September 7th.
September 7th, I'm sorry. That is at the festival. You may know Todd from his acting performances. If you've seen High Fidelity, he would be the extra knowledgeable record clerk. Next we have Jeff Orlowski, who is the director, cinematographer, and producer, man of all trades, of Chasing Ice, the documentary about climate change, and a guy who knows about cold weather. Next in line, Hallie Myers-Shire, whose two last names almost rhyme, who is the screenwriter of Chelsea, a movie that will be shot soon. So she's here to talk about screenwriting and getting into the business. And last, we have Brian Larson, who is the story supervisor on Brave, the Pixar film that opens today. Since there's no real format, I thought I would just sort of one by one go through and start with an opening question. Mike, what was the most difficult thing in making your very first movie?
Is this guy on? Okay. The question was...
You can make up a new question if you'd rather.
No, usually the Q&As I have to repeat the question because there's no other microphone. So, and it's people just shouting, and so I have to repeat the question. Which begs the question, why am I repeating the question since you are amplified? And it's just it's habit. But what's the most difficult thing about making a film? This is my first film. I wrote a book a couple of years ago of the same subject called Sleepwalk With Me and Other Painfully True Stories, and that was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life, and making a film was unimaginable. It was the hardest thing I could imagine that one could do in one's life. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly. It's just like what it is. It's just that there's directing a film, there's about 400 questions asked to you per day by the various art departments and costume departments, camera departments, obviously working with actors, and you can't process all the questions. A human brain has not evolved to a point where it is prepared to answer the amount of questions that you're asked in a day. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, ditto.
And then you just answer as many as you can, and then you go to sleep for like 5 hours, and then you do it again the next day until you wrap. And then you're like, what the fuck happened? You know, and then you're like, I hope there's a movie.
And there is a movie, and a good one, that Mike wrote, directed, and stars in with help from others. Todd and Sarah, do you want to talk jointly or together? I guess.
Any words.
Just go one word each.
Okay.
Just do sort of a choral speech thing.
I guess with you two, Todd had already made a film, so this will be your second film that you've directed, third film that you've directed.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you've got a track record, does it ever get easier?
No, it kind of always start off. I find from it gets easier as far as knowing what you're in for, and that's incredible. But with this film, Sarah and I made like a very conscious choice to go back to very small movies, and that was really gratifying about this. It was, it's a real character-driven piece, and we shot it in 20 days last August. And what was the hardest thing about it? Did you ask me what the hardest thing about it was? Okay.
But it's a good question.
Okay. Come on, help me out.
People, by the way, if they haven't seen this movie, have to see it. I saw it yesterday, and it is incredible.
Thanks.
Well, let me.
Thanks.
All right.
Oh my God. Picked
Among
up
the
slack
harder
for me.
things.
Thanks.
You have a terrific cast in this film. How did you get? They have named Melanie Linsky, Blythe Danner, just great cast. How did you land the cast you did, and did that make the difference in financing?
No, actually, yeah, that's a great question. The Melanie, the script went to the Sundance Screenwriters Lab, and then Sundance really helped shepherd us along, and we did a reading of the screenplay. Gosh, was it November of 2010, I guess, and Melanie. We asked Melanie to do the reading, and after that, it was just really her role because she just was incredible in the reading. And from there, Blythe signed on very early, and Christopher Abbott, who plays Jeremy, just actually auditioned, and he was amazing. But the financing.
It was hard to get.
Yeah, thank you. It was difficult to get, but the cast was just amazing, and we did it with everyone who did the film wanted to be there, and that made a huge difference for shooting the film and the feeling that I felt working on the film and in editing. It was something I just. I didn't twist anyone's arm to be there as an actor, and the actors are getting paid $100 a day, and so they're really doing it, for the love of the project, and you can really feel that it wasn't a drag for anyone, and that shows up on screen, I think.
Sarah, do you have anything to add, or he covered it there?
What was the question again?
I guess as the screenwriter, were you on the set? Did you write on the fly? Were you changing things as you went on during the shooting?
There were some things that I had to change, and we have 2 young children, and so
These two are
We're
married.
by the way.
Not that it
So
matters. Like they could have 2 children and it would be cool with everybody, right? If they weren't married.
it was very difficult. That was very difficult. Just trying to. It was like having 2 children, having a newborn or something. You know, the movie was constantly needing attention, and our children were needing attention. So it was challenging. So a lot happened by text.
Yeah, that was interesting.
I mean, really, like at 3 a.m, I would get a text like, "This scene, something's not working." I would give dialogue in the scene, or give thoughts about characters, and
By text.
by text, because it went very, very fast. We did not have there were some scenes that were shot in the middle of the night, and we only had 1 or 2 takes, and so we had to really, the actors had to be really ready and really know what was going on, and the script had to be really strong. So
It worked out really. It was pretty
It was good,
amazing.
yeah, it worked out.
I couldn't, because we hadn't really talked about that until a couple days before we started shooting. We were
Yeah.
like, "Well, can I text you, during a scene?"
Yeah.
And she was like, "Yeah, great." So we ended up.
sometimes it was kind of crazy, though.
But the
I would
director
be like,
respected
"This is
your works.
horrible, and I can't do it anymore. You have to do it, you asshole. You committed." But we erased those ones, and
And the marriage survived.
yeah.
Okay, good. I feel like I'm working for Ladies' Home Journal. Can this marriage? All right. Jeff Orlowski, Chasing Ice. You're the documentarian here. Everyone else is sort of narrative feature film. This is a film about climate change, correct?
Yeah,
that
I look at it as
fair?
more about this photographer and his personal story, but ultimately it is very much about climate change.
Okay. What drew you to this film, and when did you decide this must be a documentary?
I first met the photographer James a year or 2 before the project started, and as he was getting these cameras, did any of you see it last night, or a decent number? It's also screening tonight. When
What time and where?
9 o'clock, I forget where. I think it's Bennett. Yeah. So when I first met James, he was wanting to start this project where he was going to build these time-lapse cameras and deploy them all around the Arctic. And his goal was to take photographs of these glaciers over time and have a record of climate change, like what's happening with the glaciers. This project could only have been done as a documentary, and the only way that I got involved in the team was to offer to shoot video, and I volunteered my time, and I was just working to document all the video and helping him install cameras and everything else. So that's kind of how it got started, and it was about a year of just following him in Greenland, Iceland, Alaska, Glacier National Park, before I finally convinced him to let me make a movie about him. We had this huge archive of footage, and we had the time lapses really starting to reveal what was happening with the ice. So it was, I've done narrative work too, I've done short commercial work. It was a completely different experience than having to be on set and manage a whole bunch of people. It was trying to work with one person and just trying to constantly convince them to let me go ahead and make this film about them, which was equally feeling like I was hitting my head against a wall. But it was a long process to make that happen. The post was really difficult, the fundraising was really difficult. Ultimately, it took 5 years to make the film.
5 years to
Yeah.
make a documentary.
Yes.
And
Which had I known that at the beginning, I don't know if I would have wanted to. But it was one of those things where we had a cut of the film, and I was screening it to friends, and there were things that were great, and there were things that weren't working. And I feel like with documentaries, more so than with narratives, like you're really writing the story in the editing room, and you're figuring it out in the editing room. And we had 400 hours of footage, and we were trying to figure out, okay, so we've got these scenes that tell this certain part of the story. Do we want to use them here or there, or should we switch them around? Or, well, I have this other scene, and I can make it tell this part of the story. And really, it's just figuring all of that out in the editing room.
what is the biggest lesson you learned that you will take to the next documentary?
Try to get grant funding earlier on. That's by far the single most valuable lesson. We, at a certain point in post, we were really wanting the film to get finished. We wanted it to get out there, but we still needed more funding. But I thought, okay, the grant cycles take a year. They take several months. They take a long time. We didn't have the time to do it. So we passed on applying for grants, and we were just trying to seek independent, private donations and funding. And then we kept working on the editing and kept editing, and a year went by, and we're like, well, the film's still not done, and I don't have the money, but I still don't have the time to apply for grants. And yet another year went by, and so that cycle repeated a couple times. But future reference, if I had funding for a project going in at the beginning, that would be really nice.
Okay. Hallie, this is your first screenplay, which you sold, which with any luck will be made within the year. Is that the timing?
Hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a film about a family and a young woman who's a ballerina who sort of inspires any number of people, all set at the Chelsea Hotel in New York. Is this the first screenplay, or are there a bunch in the drawer already?
This is my third screenplay that I've written, but it's my first original.
The other two were adaptations?
Yeah, the first was an adaptation of a children's book, and then the second was a rewrite.
Okay.
This is the first one that's entirely my fault.
All right, and everyone takes screenwriting courses. Everyone reads the books. They all go, you have to have the acts, you have to have the arc in the character. Did you do any of that, or you just wrote what you needed to write?
No, I did all of that.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you should sort of follow the structure pretty clearly on your first project, just to make sure that you don't break any rules without knowing what you're doing.
So is it exactly 120 pages and et cetera?
Well, no, it's not. It's less, thankfully. But there's a thing on Final Draft where you can put it in tight, and that makes it a lot shorter.
And is it the writer or is it the software that makes the difference?
Yeah. I mean, I tend to overwrite a bit and then come back and cut it down. But I think structure is extremely important, hitting all those beats. I think even if you're trying to experiment, you still want to hit those notes.
So ahead of time, you have completely mapped out the structure and then fill in the dialogue?
Yeah, I outline pretty thoroughly. There's obviously room for improvisation, but I think for me, outlining makes me know what I'm doing when I wake up in the morning. Writing is all you, and it's all on you. So I think it gives me kind of a writing partner, which is just me a few months earlier.
I was doing a story earlier this year on a director who's friendly with Tom Cruise and says sometimes Tom Cruise comes over and will read scenes for him. And
Tom and I do that as well.
Yeah, but he said, sometimes you realize, oh, this one needs to go back in the drawer. This one doesn't work, or that's better than I thought it was. Did you have friends read this out loud, and what did you find out from that?
I didn't do that, but I read it out loud myself.
Okay.
Which is odd for my roommate, but I definitely, I act it out. I don't think there's anything more helpful than hearing your words out loud, because then you can see if there's a sense of reality there or not, and what's funny and what's not. It's important for comedy, I think.
Okay. Brian, Brave.
Yes.
Pixar. I'm going to go farther than just making those words up. The movie is Story Supervisor. Could you
Yes.
explain what that title means?
Well, what I do is I work with the director very closely. I was on the project for 6.5 years, and I help develop and find the look that they want for the film. And we come up with story beats, structure, and we write scenes. But coming up visually stylizing what he wants to say or what the directors want to say is my job, and I have to relay that to the story team.
So this film went through a director change,
Yes.
if I've read my gossip right?
Yes.
So you were there the whole time?
The entire
through.
time, yeah,
Okay.
the entire time.
Are you doing anything else besides this film during those 6.5 years?
I took a small break to help out on Ratatouille when that had a push at the end. But generally, I was there the whole entire time. And the most difficult part about that process, I think in any Pixar film, if I can answer the original question, would be to come up with appealing and original characters. That was something that we really did struggle with on Brave for quite a long time, especially having a teenager. And I'm not sure what your experiences are, but they can be like effing a-holes at times. And we didn't want that. right? Like, so we wanted to tell an honest story about a mother-daughter relationship, but that could be, we were like, let's hear the stories, and then it started coming out like, okay, we can't tell that story. That's really terrible. Okay, and these were real stories from people on the crew, and it just became this. We have to find the honesty in that storytelling and with these characters, but we wanted it to where you like Merida. You cannot go into this film going, oh God, here's a teenager, and I want to, take her, slap her. You can't do that like that. So that was so difficult to find that, and we didn't want the mother to be a terrible person either. And then so that was so difficult going through all of these things.
Can I just
with mother-daughter relationships, not just mothers in general. Don't get me wrong.
If any of this is quoted out of context, Pixar is in so much trouble.
Yeah. You're not recording, are you?
This was also a female heroine, which is something new for...
Yes, and we wanted, again, going just back to the honesty question, we wanted to be honest with it. We didn't want to make cliche characters, and we wanted this person to be very strong and independent and have a voice of her own. But to find that, to dig for that, the story, the structure would constantly change, scenes would constantly change, but we couldn't let that character change. And to dig and to find that is certainly a challenge for me. And on this film, we wanted you from the very first moment to like this character. And if any of you know how to do that, please tell me. It's so difficult to do.
All right, since I've got you here, I'm going to ask, she looks exactly like Rebecca Brooks of the News Corps scandal.
Oh.
What happens when news... it's the red hair. It's that wild mane of curly red hair. What happens when the news overtakes something you've been working on for 6.5 years?
Wow. We really just try to make something so great that you will ignore if something else tries to overshadow that. But yeah, we really go, oh man, what timing can really affect something, an opinion about what we make. But I think if you make something with quality and, again, being honest about something, that it's not going to reflect something else. And I really hope that people can walk away with that. But yeah, sometimes timing can really go, whoops, maybe should have come out a year earlier. Oops.
Okay. Before we open it up to questions, I'm going to go through with the panel and ask the same question of everyone. Just in an era when there are so many entertainment opportunities now and so many platforms and so many ways to make entertainment, and everyone can make it in their, with their iPhone, I guess I would ask,
who would do that?
No, that's a given. What got you, what made you decide, there is this thing I need to say and I need to say it publicly? What made you decide to perform, write, put things on a screen? Mike?
It's a really good question because I'm sure these guys deal with this question all the time, having to do with specifically television, because television is so cinematic right now. These shows that are so great, like Mad Men and Girls, and that are so cinematic that some would argue they're better than a lot of films that come out, and some people would say they're not, and that the film has its own unique quality that can't be achieved in television. I think, I personally see it as it's an emotional decision. It's something that if you were ever affected by a film in your life in a way that you were never affected by any other media, be it television or internet videos. I don't know if anyone's affected by internet videos, but I feel like if you're affected by film specifically as a medium, you want to do something ultimately that's cinematic and can play on a big screen, like you guys are so kindly showing these films this week.
That's really interesting, yeah, because I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, growing up watching films, I think I was naturally drawn toward that, and that's what's inspiring. And also, I mean, it's specific also to the story that you want to tell, and as what motivates.
90 minutes to 2 hours on screen is the best way to tell this story.
Yeah. Or, oh. Wow. Thank you, Sarah. Oh. What did I do?
Text? Need to text?
Lower.
All right, Sarah, you're an actress as well. What drew you, what made you decide I need to write? What made you decide it needs to be my words, not other people's?
The words I had to say were so terrible that, no, but it's true. I did find myself rewriting things, and I was always a writer also, so it just took the foreground. But I think that there's something really powerful, and like Hallie was saying about this hitting the beats, and even though things that are overly structured can be kind of cumbersome, there's something in dramatic structure that's really human and something that we need. If you look at the Greek plays, that's really the heart of dramatic structure. And it's something very primal and connected to, I think, to our humanity. And so even though I love what's on TV and I love writing those kinds of scripts, there's something that you're really pushed when you write with the dramatic structure, like really traditional dramatic structure, that in a way that you're not pushed in the same way, and that you really, it's much harder to get it to work, but it feels, not to be too new agey, but it does feel like experientially it can be much more potent, to have a collective experience of a journey, of a personal journey. So
Great.
Well,
Yeah.
and the experience in the theater still is something that we respect as a society and a culture. Like, we go into the dark room and we turn our phones off. Like, it's one of the few places where we'll still turn our phones off and dedicate, an hour and a half and pay full attention. And I feel like anything that gets that sort of resonance with the audience, like, I think it's one of the most powerful mediums that an artist can work with right now, because it is leveraging, all these different, areas, from photography and sound and storytelling and music, and you can paint this picture and you have complete control, and the audience is sitting there enjoying that whole experience. I also think just representing some of the documentary perspectives, I've had the opportunity to see a lot of documentary films this year just on the festival circuit, and they're getting so much stronger. I mean, documentaries are becoming less and less like essays about a certain subject, and they're becoming more and more about a person and a narrative story about a person, and you learn about a subject through that narrative story. My producer did The Cove, and they really shattered things with that model and turning documentary into a heist movie. And then this year there's The Imposter and
The
Searching
Cove
for
was
Sugar.
the movie about dolphins in Japan.
And and then this year there's The Imposter and Searching for Sugar Man that are out, and they're both incredible mystery stories in documentary form. And I think the more and more we start seeing documentaries shift into using some of the narrative techniques, it's just going to make documentaries all the stronger. And I also think that people are they're searching for some sort of truth and reality. I feel like we are in a world where we're so inundated with stories that are so completely over the top, and we're
Hello, Spider-Man,
or the multiple Transformers, things like that, where people want some sort of reality. And when you have true stories that are being told in documentary that can still convey that technique of storytelling, I think it's just all the more successful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hallie, you're the generation that, certainly grew up entirely on the alternatives. I assume you were watching videos as an adolescent, et cetera. Why film?
Yeah, I didn't so much grow up on that kind of stuff. For me, I was always watching old movies, and not even on DVD yet, Laserdisc. And for me, it never occurred to me to do any other medium, because this was always kind of the great love of my life was film. But I think right now more than ever, it's really important to be making films, just because there are a lot of superhero movies and sequels and prequels that, it's good to be telling human stories and human experiences, and hopefully audiences will return to those kind of movies. Festivals like this help, but I think it's important to be telling the human experience, not just on television, and making sure that it is done cinematically and artistically, and hopefully we'll have faith that people will go see them again.
And Brian, why animation as a way of storytelling?
We want, and especially me, I want to inspire people when they come out of that movie theater. That I love it when, on the car ride home, that if they're still talking about the film or they're arguing about the film, something about that it's a piece that you will carry with you. And specifically with Brave, the fairy tale has been done, I don't know how many times and for how many years, and we definitely took on that challenge of let's do something new and inspire somebody. And animation specifically is just such a wonderful medium to play with. It's completely different than the rest of the panel in some ways. It's in slow motion, that we're making films in slow motion, which makes it even more difficult, but we're still, everyone up here is accomplishing, I think, that same goal, is everybody wants to sit in that theater and turn off their phones and just let it go and escape for a while. And I think animation has its own little forgiveness as far as that you will accept something a little bit differently than what a documentary would say. So we try to use that to our advantage. Like we could
In other words, a rat as a hero.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you would, that would look really. You could still do it in live action, but it would feel right.
The music would be really important.
Yeah, right. It would be. So we use that to our advantage, but inspiration, I believe, is the best thing, and what drives everyone, especially me, to make these films. And films are it for me. I love it. That's the medium that I think can communicate any voice that we want right now.
Great. Let's open it up to questions, and I would ask that you say to whom you're asking the question and speak loudly. Gentleman right back there with his hand raised, politely.
I guess the question is more or less to everybody. Ever since Louis C.K. got people to pay $5 for his comedy special, which was un-DRM and not treating a person like the criminal before they committed a crime, do you think that we're going to see similar things coming out from feature film directors and on a budget that would be equal to Hollywood productions in the future, and basically having an environment where there wouldn't be so much of a studio system, it would be more the director, the crew, and then the people who would fund their movies directly?
Essentially, the question is, are directors going to cut out the middleman of the studio, go straight to the audience saying, here's my new movie for X dollars online, you can have access to it? So basically, are you just going to go right to online with your movie, and what is the advantage to that?
This isn't an answer to that question, but these coffee cups are so small.
Okay, that would be Mike's answer.
I don't know if you guys noticed, it's like Dixie cups of coffee, but the event is called Morning Coffee, and I just feel like coffee should be more highlighted in this event.
May I say, as a tea drinker, we're completely discriminating.
I know there was just milk. I'll come get it. I don't mind.
He really doesn't want to answer this question.
All right, would anyone else like to address that question?
Well, it's kind of started with Kickstarter, hasn't it? In a certain way.
Well, Kickstarter's raising money, isn't
right.
it, for your product?
I mean, that's kind of what. Are you talking about it in a sense, raising money that way, or revealing a story along?
Louis
along
C.K.,
the
the comedian, went right. Just said to his fans,
right.
$5. Here's my concert. Here's my comedy
right.
concert. So would you, with your film, rather than going into theaters, I mean, essentially it's video on demand online, and they pay you.
Right. But you have to find a way to raise the money to make that.
You have to raise the film, to make the film.
Yeah. So that's the catch.
I think you're going to see more and more of it over time. I know a lot of friends who have been considering, okay, should we just release it for free and open it up for donations. I think that model's continuing to shift. I think it also depends on the project itself. Like our film, I'd rather it be seen on a big screen rather than online. And if you release it online, then you can't even do it theatrical typically. So there are lots of, you're trying to work with like the existing system, but then also trying to leverage the web. I think something like comedy does really, really well just distributed online. So I think it depends on the project. It depends on, you're not going to see that for a while from the big studios. It's going to be the independent filmmakers and the independent artists who would kind of pave that way, if anything.
It's also too, I think you're definitely going to see a lot more, no matter what. The internet has changed the way even media has been delivered. But to get lost in that shuffle is going to be the next big trick of like, I'm sure you're going to see a lot of people doing it, but by definition, a lot of people are going to be doing it. And how do you get that one to be stand out or recognized is going to be a challenge unto itself. Just to promote any one of these films takes a whole division of people. I'm for it. I love that people can go home and make these videos and have their own thoughts and ideas of cinema. And I think then they realize, my God, this is so difficult. Why would anybody do it? And then to self-promote it on the internet is great, but it's going to be a challenge unto itself, I believe. But
Yeah, you can't really work with a super big budget, like let's say $3 million.
yeah, or even 10,000, whatever it would be.
Yeah.
It's
There was a film a couple years ago, a girl walks into a bar that they released on YouTube. And it was sort of the first time YouTube had done that. But they made it for almost nothing. The first weekend had 100 or 200,000 viewers. But you can't do that with a film you're making for hundreds of millions of dollars.
Well, I can also, because I'm a comedian, this is like what all my friends are doing
In
right
your
now.
wheelhouse.
Yeah, Louis and Aziz Ansari and Jim Gaffigan did it this year. Basically, the reason why it happened was comedians like Louis, but we all kind of realized it at a certain point. We're all doing these TV specials, and we see the budgets. We know the budget's like $200,000. We know they're licensing it to a TV network for like $250,000, and then on top of that, there's DVD sales, and so it's like negative math before it's even begun in terms of the budget versus the gross, and it's like, and so it was with comedy specials, it's kind of a no-brainer, and I actually think it will continue. And then what's going to happen is the market's going to catch up. It's already catching up. You're already hearing about, a lot of TV networks. I won't name names, but a lot of big TV networks are just paying more for comedy specials now, and I think it's benefiting the artists that pioneers like Louis came along and said, "How come you're screwing all of us over?"
Okay. Next one. Woman, yeah, right back there.
This is a question for Sarah and Todd. I'm wondering where the kernel of your story came from about a woman who's divorced and starting over. You guys seem pretty happily married.
Okay, everyone hear the question? Where did the kernel of their story come from about a woman who is starting over after a divorce?
I had gone through a difficult time in my life, but I had. But I was, so coming out of it, I was interested in more how we sort of stay children and people grow up at different ages and they leave home in different ways, and how we sort of carry our childhood home around in our heads, even if we've left it sometimes. And so it was more that, it was the feeling of, I wanted her to be sort of dropped suddenly, which is often how it feels to me. How did I get back here is the feeling that I feel when things are really difficult. So it was more that feeling and finding what would happen if I suddenly had nothing and I was totally dependent on my parents as an adult. So it was sort of building those circumstances so that she really had no say again. So that was sort of more of what it was.
Okay, next question. Gentleman back there.
Were you actually present when the giant
Yeah, I shot that. The question was
just repeat
about
the
this
question?
this large calving event in the film. It's kind of one of the highlights of the film. It's a 75-minute long event of ice breaking over. It's the largest calving event that's ever been shot in high def, basically. And so it was myself and Adam, and the two of us spent basically a month camped out in Greenland, just hoping to capture one of these events. And we were at a different location for about a week or so, and then we switched over to this particular glacier, and it was the two of us maintaining a 24-hour vigil. So literally, we'd be up together for dinner for 8 hours. I'd have the night shift, and I'd be watching the glacier and reading a book up until like 5 a.m. And then I'd wake Adam up, he'd have 8 hours. And then we'd rotated that just literally for weeks on end. So that was a rather boring part of the project.
Okay, there was no Wi-Fi there.
No Wi-Fi, unfortunately. No, we did have a sat phone, but we weren't exactly playing games on it. But it was the two of us, and it's actually really, really difficult just to keep camp life going in those conditions too, and maintaining all the equipment. So we would regularly be downloading all the memory cards and charging batteries and doing backups. And we had a small generator that was powering our computer and hard drives. We brought literally one suitcase filled with hard drives. We had, I think, like 4 terabytes worth of data. Right now you can fit that on like a thumb drive, but back then it was like multiple hard drives. And so it was very regularly just maintaining the cameras, even just cooking and keeping ourselves fed takes a lot more time and a lot more energy up there. But we had terrible windstorms that literally collapsed some of our tents and broke some of the joints on the tents. So it was really not the most fun trip.
But it's hard to work with actors as well.
Yeah. There's this one moment where we had this terrible windstorm, and the tent is breaking, and I'm filming all of this, and I'm just trying to capture Adam going through this experience, and he gets so pissed off at me that I was shooting video and I wasn't helping him, because he's literally by himself trying to hold this tent up and keep it from being blown away down this cliff.
And you're going
And
smile.
I'm just shooting, just like that's great, awesome, keep going. And he's like so pissed off at me, and at one point he starts to curse, and like the video just cuts.
I bet craft services was terrible in that film.
They weren't there most of the time. I don't know. We were looking for them.
Hi, yes, ma'am.
I was with Jeff also. It is a beautiful movie. It's
Thank you.
very compelling. Audiences leave the movie and are just, stunned for a moment. And every comment is, well, if you didn't believe in glaciers disappearing and global warming before, you just missed the last 2 hours. So the real question is, what are people doing about it as a result? Are you finding that audiences so far are having a reaction where they want to take action? And is there something that you as a group are doing to encourage that?
Yeah, it's interesting because we didn't start this project. I didn't start the project wanting to be an activist about this. I just wanted to make this film because we had access to this great story. But I feel like I've somewhat been turned into an activist, having learned everything that I have over the past 5 years. People are very regularly asking us what they can do, and that's something that we're building into our whole strategy. And we're working on developing content that's going to be on our website that can answer all those questions, like what you can do at an individual level, what you can do to pressure our politicians, and try and make that a very public thing. We did a screening at Sundance to about 350 high school students, and I asked them at the end of the screening if any of them felt like this film changed their opinion about climate change, and literally 3/4 of the audience raised their hand that this film had a significant impact on their perception around climate change. So we're seeing that the film is having impact, it is changing opinions, and really our struggle and our challenge now is how do we get that in front of more people, and how do we also not preach to the choir, because typically the people who are going to come see the film already know about generally what's going on with climate change and the severity of it. So what we're trying to do is how do we get it in front of educational organizations and educational institutions and religious organizations, and how can we get the film out there in a way that those people wouldn't necessarily be coming to see the film on their own. So we're trying to build that into our
Fox
strategy.
News.
Yes, potentially.
Yeah, they didn't cover it. They have not covered it
They
yet.
have not covered it yet. No,
Susan.
not yet.
Bailey, wasn't really mentioned that your mom's here, she's one of the best screenwriters, not just women, but others of wonderful comedy.
Haley's mom is Nancy Myers.
And she's getting tribute here, and of course your dad, who's way,
Charles Shire.
both with your mom, part, but I would think it's very daunting to be a such talent, then maybe it helps as an inspiration, but it also might be never going to be as good as them, but I don't want to copy them. And the fact that you're shooting at the Chelsea Hotel, maybe I think your mom would enjoy that decor as much as some other people, because she has this wonderful, splendid, environments in all her films. But, I just wondered how that affected your choice, and if it's a good thing or sometimes don't.
Yeah.
Okay, I think the question is basically
yeah.
just, is it hard being a Hollywood kid, or does that give you a leg up?
A leg up, or I think just as a writer, to have that example is an inspiration, but also to go up to that is
Yeah, no, for me, it's always been great. When your parents are behind the camera, it's kind of a different experience. When you think of like a Hollywood kid, I think a lot of the time you think of actors' children, and it's an entirely different experience because they're not just on the film for a few months and then they leave and do another film for a few months, and it's like you were saying, it's like having a newborn. So for me, there was always a sort of a new member of the family that you saw, from casting tapes to one sheets in the kitchen, which one looks better, which one is this. You see, an entire experience. And I think growing up, seeing your parents do something that they really love is really inspiring. And they're writers at heart, I think. And so being a writer, there's nothing better than being able to show them my work and get really, really good notes. And my mom's super funny, which is very helpful when you're writing comedy. Yeah, for me, it was always a really good experience. And I think when you grow up in any industry, you're either really turned off by it or really turned on by it. So for me, it's kind of like, now it's, how you see like something and sons or and daughters. That's how I feel like I'm, carrying on the tradition, hopefully. So yeah, I've never seen it as a negative.
When you watched as a child watching your parents,
Yeah.
what seemed more difficult or more fun for them, the writing or the directing?
Directing seemed much more difficult. They sort of seemed to have a lot of fun writing, and then directing was like going to Nam. Yeah.
Okay.
The Chelsea. And as far as the interiors go, I think we're going to stick with the Chelsea interiors and
It's being
not put in
renovated.
any Williams-Sonoma home or anything. Yeah. The cast. We're still putting it together, and so far we have Felicity Jones attached from Like Crazy, and she's going to play the ballerina. And yeah, we're putting it together. We're still casting now.
More on Hollywood Deadline soon. Yes.
This is for Pixar.
Oh.
So I know that for feature films, live action, the structure, like director, DP, is different than in Pixar. And so how does that work in Pixar in order to be able to keep a completely different corporate structure, but keep the creativity there?
It's not as different as you think.
Can you sort of repeat the question or your version of it?
Was the different structures in animation compared to live action, and how do we keep the creativity with something so different? But they are two different animals to begin with. But we still do have just a director, and there are leads. You still have your lead editor. We do have a DP that you're always going to be talking to, but we just make it again in slow motion. It becomes much more difficult because we are making it in slow motion over many, many years, and that we can change anything at any point. I think that is, to me, to help answer the question, is that in live action, you shoot it, and you get it, and then you're done. And then you got to go and make it in the editing room, and that's all you have. Like, maybe you'll get some pickups, maybe, but that's the beast that you're going to make, whatever things that you shot. Those are the pieces that you're going to build your film with. With animation, it becomes that corporate of like, let's take that scene out, and can you give me 2 frames here? We can move an invisible light to light somebody's face. It becomes, so that becomes then the slow motion part, which really the machine starts slowing itself down, and we can control every single frame up until the last minute of like, we need one more line of dialogue from Kelly. Can we get that? And it's like, well, sure we can. Just call her. And and then the animator is there, and and they don't animate like that, but.
Are they wearing mittens?
Yeah. Well, that's really the writers. They do that. But does that help answer your question? I guess that we do have every single person that you would have in a live action film, but we're generally in different buildings, and sometimes you'll never talk to one another until you see, oh, that's how you lit that. That's fantastic. And I hope that answers it, if that makes sense.
Okay, Ms. Myers.
I have a question about Brave also.
Yes.
Was it hard getting it through the pipeline? I have a couple questions. A movie about a girl. Did they ever worry boys aren't going to come see a movie about a girl?
Was it?
Why did you pick a redhead? I love the title. When I saw the one sheet, I really got excited. I thought, wow, this is a great girl. Well, Brave, then what were the other options for titles?
It was not hard to get through the pipeline. John was on it from the get-go. Thought that Disney especially had done so many fairy tales. He's like, let's do something effing different.
John Lasseter.
Yes, John Lasseter.
at Pixar.
So he was behind it the whole way. So it was not difficult to get that in. That's the next part is we weren't worried. We were concerned, what's the hook for them? And we're like, what, swords and arrows and bears? And well, there's no problem. Pixar was never really worried about that. We're trying to make the film for everybody and not exclude certain people. But I think we were definitely focusing on the triplets as that's the boy way to get in. But again, I'm saying like she's riding horses with swords and, there's some action. So we weren't quite concerned with that. We were really just concerned about this redheaded girl. And the redhead came from Brenda Chapman, just her hair. And she's like, I want to talk about this hair. Like want people to know that it's difficult to comb and it gets in your face. And then the technical guys were like, oh God, like how do we build something like that? Because also in animation, everybody wants to, show the face and look at the eyes. And sometimes it was falling in front of the face and we wanted it to be a little bit dirty. And again, that is something that we can control to the end. Can I get that hair moved a little bit? And again, in live action, it's like, nope, that's kind of what you got. Brave was the code name for the film. Actually, Brave Hair for a long time. Yeah. We're like, oh, what are you working on? Oh, well, yeah, I'm on Brave Hair. And so we came up with other titles like The Bear and the Bow, but people were like a bow? No, let's get rid of that title. And then we just kept coming back to Brave, Brave, and then we just stuck with that for years. And we're like, why don't we use that one? And the people at Disney were like, we like that. And everybody's like, well, we like that. And okay, well, I guess we should do that. All right. Yeah, it was so strange. I was just always kind of there. Was there any more questions or what?
Given that it's Scottish, any relation to Braveheart?
We didn't want that. We were trying to avoid that, but then it's like it's unavoidable. But it was like let's just use it, and it was it had an empowering voice, and there's always this thing. Andrew Stanton would always be, you got to say it like it's on movie tone. The guy who talks like, you are going to see Brave. You would, does it sound okay when you say that? Like, because all the kids go, Nemo, Nemo, or up. There's always like these one-word things. And we would, try to say it in those voices for a long time. And like Brave seemed to work. So there you go.
All right. Back there.
One quick question. I noticed the movie Brave is dedicated to Steve Jobs.
Yes.
Did you see any, was he aware of the story? Did you get to see it?
Oh yeah, no, because the story's been around for 7 years. He was there. He loved it, promoted it, and was invested in that film. And it was a great loss when he left us. But he never got to see the final version. It was still way in development, but he certainly had his input on it as things went along with Brave that we were struggling with, that we could always find, oh yeah, here's A to B to C, and it seems like that's a movie. He was like, what's making this Pixar? He goes, I see that this is a good movie, but what's making it Pixar? And we were like, I don't know, Steve. And that was really hard, but he was, so he was aware of it for a very long time, but yeah.
All right, my understanding is these things are supposed to wrap up at 10 because there's going to be more movies. Is that correct? Is there anyone in authority? So one last question. Gentleman right in the front.
This is for Todd and Sarah. I was wondering if you could speak to making such like a human story that's so raw, really. How much control can you afford to give the actors? Do you feel like a lot of your work is done at the casting and then put them in front of the camera and try to get like as raw and organic as possible? Or on like such a tight shooting schedule, do you really have to like map everything out and like make sure they're doing everything like just how it needs to be.
I guess the question is, how much leeway do actors have when you're doing such a raw human story and under such a tight schedule?
I think Sarah worked on the script for so long, and I'm not so much into improvisation as an actor or a director, and so it was very a lot of it's with casting for me. I think it's like one of the most important parts of a film for me, because I think you just get a sense from the person when you meet them, when you're with them, when you hear them read, and actors are such amazing artists that I think if you cast that person correctly, and even if not everything's perfect about them, which it's never going to be, they're going to show up in front of the camera and bring you something amazing and new, and I just let go and kind of give over to them, because I just like I feel like it's mostly just giving them the job and then watching what they bring to it, and not giving so much direction on set even, because that I feel like steps on actors' toes a lot, and I like to just see what they do. But as far as dialogue is concerned, there's not much improv at all within the film. Do you have anything to add to that?
I think in this project too, Melanie really, because she's so connected and she's so amazing, she really was the centerpiece of the film emotionally. So I think the other actors, they really had to go there with her. It's like playing tennis with a pro, but for her, it's like really, she goes so deep in herself that I think it really made everybody want to do the same. Similar to Todd's film Love Liza with Phil Hoffman, he does the same thing. If you have somebody like that in a film, everybody follows.
He steps up.
So basically, the key is just get a really good actor in your lead, and everything else falls in place.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. If we could have a hand for the panelists. And enjoy the movies.